Chapter 17. Zoran quietly let himself into his suite of rooms. His mother and Mandra had completed the preparations for the dinner. It had been interesting explaining how all the dishes being served to his mate needed to be free of any meat or meat products. Due to the nature of their dragon, meat was a mainstay for their bodies. He was not sure how Abby's dragon would handle her aversion to meat once the transformation was complete. The transformation. That was another issue he was going to have to explain to Abby. He was just worried about how she would handle it. Abby had been through many changes in just a few short weeks. He wanted her to accept his world and love it as much as he did. She was now its queen. How could he throw something else at her? Walking through the bedroom into the bathing room, Zoran paused at the door, drinking in the sight of Abby lying in the bathing pool. The crystal clear water swirled gently around her naked form. Was it possible to be jealous of water? Zoran thought, as he felt himself harden. He was trying to give Abby some personal time. He was in meetings most of the day with his brothers and close security advisors, going over the information Creon had discovered about his kidnapping. If the information was correct, then there were some serious threats to his people he needed to deal with immediately. "Zoran, you're back," Abby said. She raised her arm up out of the water in an invitation for him to join her. Zoran's eyes darkened with desire as he quickly shed his clothes. Descending the steps into the warm water, he pulled Abby into his arms, crushing her lips with his own. "You are so beautiful, Helila." Abby gasped as Zoran grasped one of her nipples in his mouth and began sucking on it. "You aren't so bad yourself," Abby whispered. She quickly twisted around, pushing Zoran back against the steps, and straddled his lap, slowly impaling herself on his thick cock. Zoran let out a groan as he felt Abby's sweet warmth encase him. "Oh, Elila, you are my life." Pushing up until his full length was buried inside Abby, Zoran wrapped one hand around Abby's neck, pulling her down to capture her soft whimpers in his mouth, while his other hand gripped her hip tightly in an effort to maintain what little control he had left. Abby couldn't stand the pressure. Her blood burned with the need to ride him. "Zoran, I need you," Abby groaned, feeling the heated waves of desire building stronger than ever. "Now!" she screamed as a wave crested. Zoran's eyes glittered brightly as he watched Abby's eyes change to narrow slits, and her arms and chest began rippling with colors of pale blues, golds, and whites. A soft growl came from her throat as she threw her head back and began riding him faster and faster. He slid his hands up her back, feeling her skin begin to change as the beginnings of her long wings began forming. Her dragon was making soft mating coughs, calling to his as it fought to emerge for the first time. Zoran's own dragon was fighting to pull free as it tried to answer its mate's call. He gritted his teeth trying to pull it back. Now was not the time. Abby wasn't ready, even if her dragon thought she was. He needed to give her more time to adjust to living here first. Realizing if he didn't do something fast to stop her dragon from taking control, she would go through the change right there in the bathing pool, he pulled even harder on his dragon. Zoran let out a dark growl of warning to Abby's dragon right before he sank his teeth into the junction between her shoulder and her neck in warning that he was the dominant mate and for Abby's dragon to submit to him. Abby didn't know what was happening to her. She felt like she was on fire, her blood boiling. It was almost like there was something inside her fighting to get out. She could feel her skin tingling all over as wave after wave hit her. The skin on her back felt like it was ready to burst, as if thousands of little fingers were threading through, scratching to get out. Small, strange sounds were coming from her, but she didn't seem to be able to do anything about it. It was like she was calling for something, begging for it to come get her, help her. She heard Zoran growl, as if from a distance, and the sound sank deep into her, just as she felt the flash of pain and an explosion of desire so sharp she climaxed, a silent scream tearing from her throat as she convulsed around Zoran. Zoran closed his eyes as he tasted the sweetness of Abby's blood flow into his mouth, where he held her down in an age-old show of dominance. He groaned as he felt Abby's climax wrapping a hard fist around his cock, squeezing him until he had no option but to release her neck and cry out as his own climax was forced from his body. He shuddered as he felt the hot jets of his seed release deep into Abby's womb. Zoran wrapped his arms around Abby's slender frame, pulling her down until she lay around his chest. He felt weak as a newborn babe as the last of his semen pulsed into her. Zoran lay back with his head resting on the side of the bathing pool, his eyes closed as he gently stroked Abby's hair and back. He would never get enough of her. Neither would his dragon, which demanded that he let the transformation complete since it wanted to be with its mate. "Soon, my fierce warrior, soon you will be able to mate as I have done," Zoran reassured his dragon. "I can't believe we're late," Abby muttered under her breath as she and Zoran hurried down the long corridor. "We would have been on time if you had kept your hands to yourself." Zoran wore a silly, satisfied grin on his face. "But you needed help with your dress." "Yes," Abby said, glaring up at Zoran. "Getting it on, not off." "But, Elila, you look so beautiful without your clothes on," Zoran said, his smile turning even more satisfied as he remembered how they ended up making love again, even when they were trying to dress for the dinner. He had done well keeping his hands off her after they finally got out of the bathing pool, until she turned around to have him tie the strips holding her gown on. The dark blue material accented her eyes, and when she turned her long expanse of creamy back to him, he could not resist running his hands down it, then under the soft material to cup her breasts. Now, due to that little distraction, they were running about a half hour behind when the dinner was supposed to start. He and his dragon had never been so satisfied. For that matter, Zoran thought with a huge grin, the beautiful gold symbiot didn't look too unhappy either, if the sparkles glittering from Abby's neck, wrists, and ears were any indication. Glancing down on Abby's dark, glossy curls piled high on her head, he could see the little sparkles of gold dancing back and forth across her skin, taking different shapes as she moved in quick little strides toward the open dining room. "You need to behave yourself," Abby said sternly, stopping momentarily to put her hands on her hips for emphasis. "I will not be embarrassed in front of your mother, brothers, and God knows who else. Do you hear me?" Zoran let out a laugh as he swooped down to brush a light kiss across Abby's lips. "I think everyone heard you, Elila, but if it makes you feel better, I will try to control myself." Abby raised one hand and gently placed it on Zoran's cheek while her other hand moved softly over the front of his pants. Rising up on her toes, she flicked her tongue along the seam of Zoran's lips. "Just until after the dinner," she growled softly before turning and walking into the large room. Zoran felt his dragon growl in response to its mate's teasing. Adjusting the front of his pants, which had become decidedly tighter, Zoran groaned softly. "Our mate is not happy about us denying her. I have a feeling tonight's dinner will be a very long and painful one for the two of us." Zoran's dragon gave an answering growl of frustration as they both watched the soft sway of Abby's delectable bottom disappear through the door. The sheer size of the dining room caught Abby by surprise, but its elegance took her breath away. Never had she seen so much glittering gold, striping the walls, accenting the tableware along the 3 long tables that had been set up in the center of the room, with staff in blue and gold uniforms, and all of the guests who were already seated, dripping with golden necklaces, earrings, wristbands. Even the light seemed golden as Abby took it all in, awestruck. "Abby!" Kara squealed in delight. Abby turned to watch as Kara approached her. Kara was dressed in a pair of dark trousers and a white top that hung low over one shoulder, bearing it. Her dark auburn hair fell in waves around her small face, the purple highlights catching in the lights. What really caught Abby's attention was the length of chain, not the gold of a symbiot, but a long length of silver that wound around Kara's left wrist to Traylon's right one, tying them together. Abby gave Kara a quick hug. "Are you all right?" she whispered, looking worriedly into Kara's eyes. Kara laughed, flipping Traylon a mischievous look. "Oh, there's nothing wrong. Loverboy here is under the impression that he's finally caught me and thinks a little old chain will hold me to him." Kara leaned forward, looking at Traylon while she whispered to Abby. "The fun has just begun." Kara smiled sweetly, ignoring Traylon's growl of warning. Giving Abby a quick wave, Kara moved off, pulling a furious warrior behind her as she danced in and out of the crowd, introducing herself. Abby jumped slightly when she felt a hand slide around her waist. "I think my brother has finally met his match," Zoran said, in amusement. "I certainly hope so," a husky voice said. "It appears that all my sons may have." Abby turned to see an older woman of incredible beauty watching in amusement as her oldest son turned a slight shade of red. "Mother, I am pleased you journeyed here." Zoran Reykill watched as her oldest son drew the small woman protectively to his side. She had arrived early, hoping to observe each of the women who had been brought to their planet. Zoran had to admit she was intrigued after hearing rumors that her oldest son had true mated with a species different from any other known to their kind. She was impressed with the other women. Each one had her unique characteristics. Zoran had fallen in love with little Kara, enjoyed the wit and intelligence of Trisha and Ariel, but she was concerned about the one called Carmen. She could sense a deep sadness in that one. But it was the one called Abby that she was most interested in meeting. It would take a strong woman to deal with her oldest. Now, she studied the delicate features of the girl who had obviously captured Zoran's heart. She let her gaze wander to the mark of the dragon on Abby's neck. So, it was true. A species not of their world had been accepted by a Valdier warrior, but even more remarkable, by his dragon and his symbiot. "Good evening, my dear. I am Lady Zoran Reykill, High Queen and mother to this motley group of misfits," Zoran Reykill said with a sweet smile as she leaned over and gave Abby a kiss on both cheeks. "Mother, you should not call me a misfit. I am High King, leader of the Valdier, and a fierce warrior." Zoran frowned at his mother, trying to imitate her fierce glare. Zoran let out a small chuckle. "Yes, well, I remember too well what you and your brother's bare bottoms looked like when I chased them. Go get your mate and me some refreshments. I am simply parched from my journey." Zoran let out a soft growl at his mother before brushing a soft kiss across Abby's forehead. "Don't believe a word she says. We were all perfectly behaved young boys." Abby giggled as she watched Zoran hurry off to the long tables filled with all types of food and beverages. Listening to Zoran's mother pick on him and his brothers made her realize that maybe this world wasn't so different from Earth. Morian looped her arm through Abby's, pulling Abby along after her as she moved through a set of huge doors that opened onto a patio area. "Zoran," Abby said, looking over her shoulder to where Zoran had disappeared. "He will have no trouble finding you, my dear. I simply need to breathe some fresh air. It has been such a long time since I've been around so many others," Morian said, moving farther into the softly lit garden area. Abby looked around as she moved down the steps to follow Zoran's mother. The garden was breathtaking. Huge trees bordered one side, while steps continued down until they ended on the edge, overlooking an ocean of green and white water. Flowers in every color imaginable, some the size of dinner plates and larger, seemed to glow, casting a soft light around hidden sitting areas. Abby walked up to one of the flowers and gently touched one of the glowing petals. The flower closed up inside itself. Startled, Abby gave a squeak of surprise. Morian chuckled as she watched Abby looking tentatively at another bloom. "I planted all of these many years ago. Most of the plants come from the area around my mountain home." Morian walked over to the bloom Abby had touched and gently spoke a few words in a low, musical voice. The bloom opened as Morian spoke to it. "You have such a beautiful voice," Abby said softly, looking at the older woman with a mixture of curiosity and awe. "Do you sing?" "Sing?" Morian asked. "Explain this to me." "It's when you say things but bring it together with a harmony, sort of like what you just did," Abby explained. "I do not know this sing. I use words blended with low sounds to speak to the plants. Can you give me an example of this sing? Do you do this a lot on your world?" Morian asked. Abby blushed. She wasn't sure if the people here in this world would like her singing. She knew she had a nice voice. She had inherited it from her grandmother and grandfather. It wasn't even as if she was all that shy about singing in front of people either, since she had sung in front of large groups in Shelby all her life. But suddenly, she didn't feel so sure. "Sing for me, Abby," Zoran said, as he moved down the steps toward his mother. He handed her a drink. "Sing for me the way you did on your mountain." He set down the drink he had brought for Abby on the ledge of the balcony and walked over to Abby. "Sing for me, Elila." Abby placed her hands in Zoran's, gazing into his eyes, as she sang a short Gaelic love song she had learned a long time ago from her grandmother. When she finished, Zoran raised her hands to his mouth and gently kissed her knuckles. "Beautiful, Elila, just like you." Abby blushed. She turned to look at Morian, who was staring back at Abby with tears in her eyes. "I like this sing. I would be honored for you to teach me." Abby smiled at Morian, feeling another thread of her despair slowly dissolving as she realized a very important ally had accepted her new mother-in-law. "Come, let us go eat and enjoy the festivities," Zoran smiled triumphantly as he realized Abby had moved one step closer to accepting his world. He wrapped his arms around the two most important women in his life and led them inside. None of them saw the dark figures hiding high among the huge trees. One figure in particular remained focused on Abby until she disappeared from sight. Only then did the last dark figure move cautiously down the tree to disappear into the darkness.